Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi. Lulla. DB will be joining me in a little bit. He's just as a programming note, he's going to be a little late this week. He's got West Side practice early this week for the whole week. So he should be joining me by the second hour at the latest. So it'll just be me and Shano to start off the show this week for the first 45 minutes to an hour.
Let's go, baby.
What's up, Shane? How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Ravi.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You feel good over there?
Yeah, whatever.
I like it when you talk to me in drops. It's a fun conversation.
Okay.
It's like DB's already here. We appreciate you joining us here on a Monday. As you heard in the open there, it was quite the eventful weekend. You got Nebraska getting their first scrimmage under their belt, but I really wanted to start with Steph Curry. The Olympics came to a close yesterday, and Steph probably had one of the signature moments from the entire Olympics on Saturday in the gold medal game against France. And one of the fun things about the internet, which, it's a dumpster fire half the time, but there are some pretty cool things about it still. And one of the things as a sports fan that I enjoy the most is when there's sort of a communal moment that happens that a ton of people are watching at the same time, and you just see the live reactions to it. And that's kind of what the last couple minutes were for Steph Curry in the gold medal match or gold medal game against France on Saturday. He had a vintage Curry moment in kind of the most classic way that you think of Steph Curry's career, just this flurry of three-pointers to put away Team France in the gold medal match. And as someone who's been a Steph Curry fan for about 15 years now, I think that's when he kind of first, maybe a little bit longer, but that's when he sort of first came on the radar at Davidson. It was incredibly satisfying for me personally, but also I think there's one of the unique responses that I kept getting on Twitter or text message or whatever was, not everybody decided to hitch their wagon to Steph and just become a Warriors fan for the last 15 years like I did.
Everybody.
Well, not everybody, Shano. But they had this reaction of like, oh, this is what it's like to get to root for Steph Curry instead of having it be constantly happening to you in that moment. And it was actually really cool to see people sort of appreciate it in a sense of when they were able to root for him. And that's how I feel that's why Steph is legitimately one of my favorite players of all time. And I have him so high on my list of all-time greats because I've been watching this type of thing happen, and there's only a handful of guys that are even capable of this. And I feel like there's only a handful of guys that have been capable of what we saw on Saturday kind of throughout the history of the NBA. Like, it's not a big list of people that are capable of doing what Curry did in the last 3 minutes against France. And certainly no one's ever done it in the fashion that he does now. And so it was a really cool experience to see other people appreciate that about Steph in a way that they probably hadn't since they were rooting for him as a Cinderella at Davidson. And I just really appreciated that, being a complete Steph Curry homer. But it was also really cool just to see that happen on, arguably the largest stage you have in basketball. I think the TV numbers were dramatically more than what you see from an NBA Finals game. I know NBC was really pleased with the ratings on it. Like, that's about the biggest stage you can do what he did on, and it was incredible to watch and incredible to kind of experience, not just as a Steph Curry fan, but as a Team USA basketball fan. Before I go any further, let's get to Out of Breath Brian giving us a call on the Hurrdat hotline. If you want to give us a call also, it's 888-638-4229. 888-267-4876. Brian, what's going on, man?
What's going on, Ravi?
How you doing?
All right. Glad you brought talking about Steph Curry this morning. 'Cause I'm still, and I've been watching the TikTok of those last 3 shots. Man, just getting so pumped up about it. He is, Magic Johnson's my favorite player of all time, but I give Steph is close up there because the man has worked on his game ever since Davidson. He could have went to North Carolina or Duke in the state of Carolina, but he went to Davidson. That was amazing how he led his team to the Sweet 16 and the work that he's done in the NBA. He is one of the greatest of all time. But besides that, I want to say, I don't even know if I want to say that track athlete's name. We know that his first name is Noah. Somebody need to build him an ark. He need to go somewhere and hide. First off, anybody that's a track athlete, I'm sorry. Nobody cares about you except for every 4 years, okay? Nobody cares about track athletes except for every 4 years. On top of that, I want to put your sport in its right place. I want you to understand. There is no network for track athletes for you to watch. They have one for bowlers. They even have one for bowlers, so that's how low you guys are. Yeah, you guys don't even have a network, but bowlers have a network. I can find their matches on TV or on YouTube all the time. But Noah, wow, that guy needs to shut up. You're not going to make any money in track. You should have thought about that before you went to the sport. Nice that you're a good athlete, but stop talking about basketball players. I mean, he made himself look real stupid, especially when he's passed out because of COVID. I know a few basketball players that have still played and performed with COVID-like symptoms. Anybody you know that had the flu before they played in the NBA and perform at a top level? That's it, Ravi. I'm done. You have a great day.
I appreciate it, Brian. Appreciate the call. I love track. I mean, he's right. I really don't pay attention to it outside of every 4 years. It's one of for me, it's one of the premier events of the Olympic Games, but it is something that, I'll pay attention to the trials. I'll pay attention to the Olympics. Occasionally, I'll check in for a world championship in the off years if there's something, like when Usain Bolt was breaking world records and things like that. I made sure I would tune in for the world championships, but it's a lot like swimming in that sense. Two of the kind of premier events of the Olympics are things that we generally do not care about for the other 4 years, the other 3 years of the kind of cycle there. And to a certain degree, you could toss gymnastics in there as well, but consistently in the Olympics, those are 3 of the most interesting performances that we tend to see, whether it's Simone Biles in gymnastics the last few years. Obviously, there's been a ton of track athletes that have made themselves stars, and Brian's right in terms of money. They're certainly not as lucrative, especially if you're not at the very top of the field there. And swimming's the same way. If you're not Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky, you're probably not making a ton of money being in those sports, but they are things that we gravitate towards pretty dramatically in the Olympics. And it might just be as simple as Americans love things they're good at, and track and swimming and more recently, at least the last 20-30 years, they've been pretty good at gymnastics as well. And so I think Americans kind of have this tendency to gravitate towards the things that we're awesome at, and it happens to be in those 3 sports. I love the sprints though, like the 100 meters, 200 meters, 400, the relays. Those are some of my favorite events in the Olympics. And I gotta give credit to, I've got a couple track coaches in my life that I know would have issues with Brian in terms of his takes on track. But, he does bring up a decent point with Noah Lyles when you're going to talk like that, you got to be able to back it up. And obviously the COVID diagnosis before the 200-meter final, I think certainly impacted his performance, but it was, it's tough to have that kind of thing on your resume in terms of all the public statements and then not be able to back it up. That's kind of the risk you run when you get into that type of thing. I did want to get back to Curry for just a second here because
By the way, was that a memorable moment?
which one?
The Curry.
Oh, 100%.
So will that be talked about 5 years down the road, the next Olympics, and then the next Olympics after that?
It'll definitely be in like the highlight packages. You know how I imagine that shot, the last one where he's over the double team, that really kind of put it away, and then he puts France to sleep with his little head on the pillow gesture that he does. I imagine that will be maybe not quite as iconic as like Vince Carter jumping over Frederick Weiss.
Right.
But that's kind of, I think, the neighborhood you're going to be talking about. Especially because that particular shot is much more consequential to the actual outcome of the games than the Vince Carter dunk was. I think you're going to be seeing that shot, especially for several Olympic cycles moving forward. It's going to be one of the more iconic shots in, I think, Olympic basketball history. And one of the cool things about it too was that 3-minute stretch, especially at the very end, where he hits 4 threes in 3 minutes to really give USA the win there, as France was making a push to make things competitive and try and, it got down to like a 3 or 4 point lead at one point, and Curry just kept pushing it back out there for Team USA. One of the most interesting things about that sequence was who else was on the floor with Curry at the time, right? Like when you're in the NBA and it's, you're in the NBA and it's you got your teammates, but there's a pretty clear hierarchy of who is, except for when KD and Steph were on the same team for a couple years, there's a pretty clear hierarchy of who's the guy in any individual moment. And that wasn't the case here. LeBron ends up being the MVP for the Olympics, and like KD had his moments, and even like an Anthony Davis had some good moments. Devin Booker had a lot of really good moments, and with all of those guys, you've got a ton of Hall of Famers on that floor at the same time, and it became clear down the stretch everybody knew Steph Curry was supposed to have the ball. Now maybe it was after he got hot, and that's fine, but there was a moment there where, especially I think it was the third of the 4 threes where Devin Booker's driving baseline and he's actively searching to try and get the ball back to Steph Curry, which was the right thing to do. There was a couple of them where Curry passes out of a double team and LeBron instantly gets the ball back to Steph Curry instead of attacking the way he had for most of the game and most of the tournament. Like there was an understanding, and maybe because it was just because he was hot, and that's totally fine. But there was an understanding who was supposed to have the ball in those moments. And to me, that was as cool as anything, being a Steph Curry apologist in that moment. It was a really, honestly, it was a great basketball game. That the Serbia game was probably a little bit better, but that and the Serbia game were great basketball games. And being a Steph Curry fan in those 2 games was an incredible experience. Chiming in on the YouTube hotline, we've got a bunch of our guys saying good morning. T-Mac talking about track versus basketball. He says team versus individual sport for the most part. There are a lot of people around the world that follow track. Yeah, I think that's true. I know people in my own life that do. I personally pretty much only follow it on the Olympic, the trials, the Olympic, and then occasionally the World Championship cycles. But I totally understand that that's a thing that a lot more people care about worldwide. There's just, and then Liquid Thoughts chimes in. There's just a lot more eyeballs on basketball than track, but it is something that people follow kind of throughout the years. Basketball is obviously a more popular sport worldwide, but especially in the Olympics, I really do think track is one of the premier events in the Olympics, and part of it is because there's such a wide variety of of events, right? And you get to watch it sort of for an extended period of time. But track is legitimately, I think, probably my favorite individual kind of event within the Olympics in and of itself. I've always loved watching track, and probably, one of my earliest memories of the Olympics, because I don't remember 92 specifically, but one of my earliest memories of the Olympics is watching like Michael Johnson in the 200, 400 in Atlanta, where he breaks the world record in the 200. Like, that's an iconic moment to me. And I think it was in 96 where he's wearing the gold spikes. It might have been 2000, but it's like this really iconic moment that, kind of makes an impression on you when you're a young kid. It's one of the reasons that I've always been a huge, besides growing up in Omaha, always been a huge College World Series fan. The first College World Series game I ever went to was Warren Morris hitting a walk-off home run for LSU in 96 to win the whole thing. Like, that's a pretty, core memory there for me that dramatically impacts how you kind of view things moving forward throughout the rest of your life. So I've always been a huge track fan, especially the sprint events and the relay events. And I'd be kind of remiss, speaking of the relay events, not to talk about the dominance of the women in the 4x4 with especially Sydney McLaughlin-Lavroni and her leg in the 4x4. That was, to me, one of the other iconic performances from this Olympics. It was just the dominance that she was able to kind of exert over the field and taking a relatively close race and basically making it over by the time the second leg of the 400 was over was a pretty incredible thing to watch. So I mean, I love the Olympics. I'm a big fan, especially summer over winter games for me. But I do think the Steph Curry thing is going to go down as one of the more iconic memories from this particular Olympics. You kind of have, which is not always the case for the men's basketball. It probably isn't since '08 with the Redeem team that basketball has been one of the main storylines. A lot of times we kind of just take it for granted that they're going to end up winning the gold, which they have 5 in a row now. But it's the world is catching up, and it's getting, it is getting closer and closer, as you saw the games with Serbia and France, and even some of the tune-up games before the Olympics started. It's a totally different sport now than it was, 30 years ago when you're talking about the Dream Team and everything like that. Which, by the way, I've had several people message me before the Olympics, during the Olympics, after the game on Saturday, asking about, like, well, okay, well, I keep having these conversations about, well, could this team beat the Dream Team and whatever. First of all, people that use the margin of error for the Dream Team's tournament versus a team in the modern era, that's a dumb argument. If somebody's making that argument against them, I just need you to walk away, right? I just need you to walk away. These are not the same types of teams they're playing in the Olympics that they were playing in 1992.
That's fine.
So if somebody's making that argument, I just need you to walk away, be like, hey, this person's not bright. I need to walk away from this argument. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, as great as that Dream Team was, you kind of have to remember where a lot of those guys were at in their careers. 2 of the best players on that team, in Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Larry Bird was a shell of himself in that Olympics. His back was shot at that point. He was 35, which in 1992, being 35 in basketball actually meant you were old, as opposed to now where it's just like, oh yeah, I got another 5 years left if you're LeBron. But you actually were old at that point if you were in 35 and playing in 1992. And also, again, his back was shot. That dude was not playing a ton of minutes. I get the name Larry Bird is really sexy and dramatic on the Dream Team roster. It wasn't the Larry Bird from the 80s. Like, that needs to be remembered when you're comparing these teams. Secondly, Magic Johnson didn't play in the NBA that year. That was the year that he had been diagnosed with HIV. He was off that entire year playing NBA basketball, and he also was 13 years into his NBA career at that point, and wasn't the same player you think about when you think about Magic Johnson. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, oh, this team was dramatically better than the Dream Team or anything like that. But if you're having these conversations, you need to remember the context of who those guys were at the time that they were playing on the dream team. Now you still had like obviously prime Jordan, prime Barkley, prime David Robinson, prime John Stockton and Karl Malone. Like you had great players in their prime still. But if you want to take a 40-year-old LeBron versus a 35-year-old Larry Bird, 40-year-old LeBron is beating that dude up and down the court all day.
So you're saying the dream team has a shot?
I think it would be really close. Honestly, I really do. I think it would be stylistically, it's a really strange matchup, as is anything from the modern era going back pre like 10, 15 years, just because of how much the game's changed philosophically. But yeah, like I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan's going to get waxed by anybody ever, right? That's just not realistic. And like I said, there's a ton of really good players in their prime on that dream team. We also have like Chris Mullin, who wouldn't even sniff being on this team. Like Christian Laettner wouldn't sniff being on the 2024 Olympics team. Like you got some of those guys on there too. And like Jason Tatum, who wasn't playing in this tournament for Team USA for the most part, is a lot better than guys that were playing for the dream team. And again, not saying that means the dream team loses, but it's at least a legitimate conversation. People that are trying to tell you that the dream team would wax the 2024 Olympic team just aren't being realistic with themselves. A, about how the game has changed, and B, about what the actual construction of that team was at that point in those guys' career. It's not a genuine argument if people aren't even considering the fact that the dream team could take an L to this 2024 team. And maybe most of all, none of those guys would know what to do with Curry.
So would an 88 dream team be better?
No, because that was the college guys. The 88 dream team would get smoked. You want to talk about like, yeah, 92 is probably your best argument. 92, 08 was a really good team. Like you'd have some teams.
But if it wasn't the college guys and it was the NBA guys from 88, would it be better?
Yes. If you're going to go like the prime guys from 88, like so you're talking like more prime Magic, more prime LeBron, or more prime Larry, like yes, that gets more interesting. But that wasn't the team at 88. So that's a alternate universe argument, Shano. But we will come back. We've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio. We'll set up the show coming up next. Some Nebraska football news to get to as well. I'm Ravi Lulla. Shane's hanging out here with me till DB gets here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi Lulla. DB is on his way. Just talked to him on the phone. He'll be joining us here shortly from the Pillar Exterior stage. That was the main man, Matt Rule, there talking about a little bit with the media after Nebraska's scrimmage on Saturday. We're going to wait a little bit to get into the Nebraska stuff until DB gets here, but I do think there's some interesting stuff both from Coach Rule and some of the other coaches, EJ Barthel and Garrett McGuire, that talked on Saturday. So that's definitely something we will get into once DB gets here.
If it was me trying to figure it out, probably I'd be like, oh, geez.
That should be coming up here in the next segment. But I did want to touch on Colorado here for a minute. And I know everybody makes the jokes that I like to hate on Deion. There's a reason I like to hate on Deion, right? There is a reason I like to hate on Deion, because he is deserving of my derision. Like, this is a guy that, man, there is a lot not to like about that guy. And we saw it again, I believe it was Saturday, as Colorado was doing sort of a fall sports kickoff thing. And the highlight of it was supposed to be, this is supposed to be a celebratory thing, by the way. This is supposed to be a, almost like their own like mini media day situation for their fall sports. And obviously the crown jewel, that's going to be the football program, and in this particular case, Deion Sanders. And he comes in incredibly hostile to the press corps, to the people in the room, and to the point where he's having these strange kind of like peeing contests over semantics of words when people are asking about the offensive line. Like, Shane, if I say, hey, you really bolstered your offensive line, what do you think I mean?
I got a couple opening statements if you guys don't mind.
I would say they got bigger.
Yeah, they got bigger, they got better, they bolstered, they
bolstered. They grew,
they beefed it up a little bit,
beefed
right?
it up a little bit. They got stronger.
You would hope so, right? Like
Right.
that's kind of that's what the word means. And Dion just went off on a reporter that used the term bolster. And he goes, what does bolster mean? And he goes, what? I mean, well, we use the word improve. It's like, okay, you really want to make semantics between bolster and improve? Does that really change the context of what we're trying to say here? Or you could just say, hey, yeah, I think we really improved. Boom. Hey, we're done. That's it. Not a big deal. It was a very, and he did this a couple times. It was a very strange dynamic. He obviously did not come into this press conference, whatever it was, in a good mood. And he just decided to pick at every little thing that rubbed him the wrong way. He then got mad about somebody using the term chemistry with the offensive line. It's like, okay, you know what they mean, Dion. You don't have to be a dill hole about every single semantic. And listen, sometimes it's important to be specific. Sometimes it's important to clarify. And as a head coach, if somebody asks you a question, you're given the opportunity to do that. You don't have to be a jerkwad about it to be like, what do you mean by chemistry? What's chemistry? Well, you know what chemistry is, Dion, and your team probably doesn't have any of it. That's why you're getting all pissy about it, right? Like, this is a guy who has had a pretty bad week, whether it's from the article from Athlon Sports that came out last week talking about how he's got a culture of bullying and guns and violence in his locker room, whether it's 24/7 Sports reporting on Shiloh's legal troubles and bankruptcy and all this kind of stuff, or whatever the case is, he's had a pretty bad week in his program. And instead of either taking accountability or addressing things head on, he gets defensive. He tries to make it everybody else's problem and then doesn't even address the real issues in the room and starts having semantics wars with words like bolster versus improve or chemistry. And, well, what does chemistry mean? It means your offensive line needs to work together, dummy. Like, you got 5 guys in a unit. They need to all know what each other's doing. Is that hard? Do you not know what chemistry means? Are you being a jerk to the journalist because you don't know what it means, or because you're just being a jerk? Because if you need a definition of the word chemistry, like, maybe you shouldn't be teaching at an institute of, or coaching at an institute of higher learning. Everybody knows what chemistry means, Dion. It's not that hard. You don't have to pick things apart just because, we've seen some of the practice film, some of the highlights that your other son that's not playing on the team, cut up so poorly that everybody under the sun, including the PGA, decided to make fun of the video because it looks like it was put together by a 6th grader. Darts only, though. Darts only. Like, this is a guy who appears to be unraveling before our very eyes when, like, there's plenty there. It's not just, there's plenty there to be worried about, whether it's, again, the culture issues, the issues with Shiloh, or apparently these weird vendettas that he's got against CBS. There was a moment in which, during the press conference, someone from the CBS affiliate tried to ask a question, and when they identified themselves, Dion said, "You're not allowed to ask questions. I'm not taking any questions from CBS. Y'all know what you did." Here's the thing. Nobody knows what CBS did, Dion. Nobody. Are you mad that 24/7 Sports was reporting accurate things about Shiloh? Because this isn't even the Athlon thing. This isn't even the bullying and guns and violence in the culture of the locker room thing. This is, hey, these are legal issues that Shiloh is going through that they are reporting on. You mad that CBS owns 24/7 Sports? Because I got bad news for you. The CBS affiliate in Denver pays you to do a show. So you're really going to embargo them from asking questions in your press conference? And then he had another another run-in with another reporter, I believe it was from the Denver Post, that was critical of him for something that he wrote as well. And he goes, "Yeah, we're not going to talk to you either." And at least that reporter was like, "Hey, why don't we settle this in private?" And it seemed like Dion was willing to do that. But all of this to say, it seems like the shine has worn off of Deion Sanders in Boulder. And I'd like you to go and read a piece by Sean Keeler of the Denver Post, who wrote this after the press conference fiasco with Deion Sanders, which lasted about 30 minutes. And go read that article, because that is the tone of a local press corps that is fed up with a head coach that acts like his stuff don't stink and went 4-8 last year. Right? Like, if you're going to act a certain way, you got to win a certain amount. I used to say this about Bo Pelini, who, by the way, won dramatically more than Deion has at this point in Colorado. And my point was, if you're going to treat the media the way Bo did, which was hostile at times, then you better win at a pretty high level, because as soon as it goes sour, you're going to have problems, right? As soon as it drops off even a little bit. I used to use the analogy of, hey, if you're going to act like Bobby Knight, you better win like Bobby Knight. Like, those are the rules. If you want to act however you want to act, you better win at a super high level. Bo maintained that for a while, and people were happy about it for a while. When he wasn't able to take the jump to the next level, guess what? People turned on him. The media turned on him. A certain amount of the fan base turned on him. And I think there was reason for that on the football field as well. But if Bo had been able to regulate his emotions a little bit better, if he'd been able to play nice with the media a little bit better, there's a pretty good chance he doesn't get fired at Nebraska. Like, if you're going to act like Bobby Knight, you better win like Bobby Knight. Because even Bobby Knight, when he stopped winning big at Indiana, was shown the door. You don't get a lot of margin for error. You don't get a lot of leeway when you're acting like an idiot and aren't winning big. And guess what? Deion's been acting like an idiot for a minute now. I'm glad that everybody else is starting to see it, but he's been acting like an idiot for a minute now. And he's putting a pretty large target on his back with Colorado, because if they don't win pretty significantly this year, it's going to be really hard to continue to want to put up with his act for another season going forward. Coming up next, we will wrap up hour number 1. This is Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back as we wrap up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla.
What up?
What's up, DB?
Trying to make it one day at a time.
You know, it's funny when he literally defines chemistry, and then, because like before he said the word chemistry, what did he say? Working in unison. That's a pretty good definition for chemistry.
Yeah,
I
so
think.
that's one of those things with him. It's like, not everything needs to be a teachable moment. I knew what he was trying to say, but that's not the time or the place.
Also,
right?
He knew what the guy was trying to say.
Well, I think the point he needed a pound of flesh.
Yeah.
Right. So that was going to be his opportunity to go get it, even though, like, that's just, it's easy because it's hindsight, but just say, listen, you know what? People talk about chemistry all the time. Let me tell you how that works.
Yeah. Or what that means for us.
As opposed to, he wanted that to be a teachable moment and be condescending, but
teachable moment's the nice way to put it. I think he wants to embarrass people sometimes.
I do think, yeah. I mean, I don't know. So, yes.
That's the vibe that I get from it.
Okay. And I would normally I would be like, maybe what was his heart. But a couple of questions before that, It was, hey, why don't you tell me what this means?
Yeah.
So you knew he was on the whole, you guys say things all the time that I don't say, that you put on our program, that you want to hold me accountable for. So let's take this opportunity to have you guys stop saying certain words. Because the reason he picked apart Bolstered is he doesn't want, now it seems like he doesn't want the fact that the offensive line is a certain thing. Like, he just doesn't want a benchmark.
Yeah.
Right?
But why does he not want a benchmark?
Because he doesn't want to be held accountable.
Right. Which is the thing that I inherently do not like about Deion.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be boxed in.
Even though He's the one that told us he went out and made the offensive line better, right?
Yeah.
When he was in the transfer portal and when he was getting Jordan Seaton, how much do we hear about how much better their offensive line was going to be?
Yeah.
So it's not like the media made that up.
No, I know. I just wonder how contentious it's going to be going forward if they don't win, because
It's getting there already.
you know, they kind of chuckled it off or laughed it off, but I don't know. That's one of those things, and I know we've had coaches in the past that will call individual media members that they've had an issue with.
Mhm.
They'll call them and they'll say, "Hey, this and this and this is going on," or the media member will say, "Hey, can I call you later on?" And I talk about it privately.
Mhm.
Like, that's not new.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can go all the way back to Coach Osborne and Lee Barfnick. Like, I'm sure that they had some great off the record conversations about how to do things, and which is one of the reasons that I like Lee so much.
Mhm.
Right, because for a while he was like the bad guy.
Mhm.
He would say things that nobody else would say.
Yeah, it was like the negative.
Although early Tom Chattel was very similar.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so you learn to kind of talk about those things behind closed doors, and then you try to move forward. With this one, I don't know if Deion wants to go back and get it.
No. That's
Right.
why I think he wants to embarrass people. That's why I took that away from it.
It doesn't seem so. I don't want to say like there's never contentious relationships. He's just willing to let this one play out publicly.
Yeah.
Which I think is weird, because the media can always write last, type last.
Yeah.
And you only leave yourself one out.
Yeah.
And the out is
to win.
You have to win.
A lot.
You have to win.
And the more contentious it gets, the more you have to win.
Yeah, and it's if you're gonna make a habit of bullying people,
Mhm.
like, you either bullies, you better be tough.
I say you better be the toughest guy in the yard forever.
You better be tough.
Always.
And if you're gonna take this stance in the media, you better win.
Yeah. Because there's
guys chomping at the bit.
Tell me if I'm wrong here. If he had a better the relationship he had with the media in Colorado last year, if that was still the case, he could win 6 games this year, they'd be thrilled.
Yeah.
They get to a bowl game, they're like, "Oh man, Deion's turning around. Let's go."
Yeah.
Right? That number keeps getting higher. The number that it has to be keeps getting higher.
Yeah, and like, full disclosure, the reason that it bugs me is because it makes this game in Lincoln so critical.
Oh yeah. Nebraska has to win.
You can't let that team beat you.
Nebraska has to beat Colorado.
So like
full stop.
Now, like, if I'm consistent, which I try to be, then I have to embrace that pressure. Right?
Yes.
It's a privilege, because he's got this thing looking such a way on the outside that if he's the only one that knows what's going on inside, and it's contrary to the what's the word?
Like public perception.
Yeah, and I say about optics.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Optics is the word we use when we don't have enough facts. If the optics are much better than they seem on the outside, and he's like holding pocket aces, look out, because it makes the hand. It makes it tough.
Makes
to
it
beat
dangerous. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to watch it play out. Listen, and they're playing a team in the opener who
could definitely get them.
Yeah.
Like NDSU could get them.
Yeah. And by the way, shout out to Jackson Williams, who just got put on full scholarship.
Yeah.
After like 2 weeks of camp.
Yeah.
I think Jackson Williams is going to be pretty good.
Pretty good. I was talking to his grandpa, I think, at 7-on-7.
Yeah.
Used to work for the World-Herald.
Steve. Yeah.
We were talking a little bit, and he was talking about Jackson and how, like, just kind of randomly, like, Trey Lance was up there working out, and he was like, "Man, like, it's weird to see your grandson, like, catching passes from a guy that was chosen third overall."
Jackson's going to be a dude. Cole Payton's up there, and you got a lot of guys that we know up there. And so I say all that to say they're playing a team that's going to have some conviction and some resolve.
Yeah.
Pretty pissy a year ago from SDSU, and let's not act like that program's not used to winning. So their resolve, if it gets physical, and I think the line is it's only 8.
Yeah.
7 or 8, something like that.
Shouldn't be any more than that.
If it gets to where you have to, show some grit, that's you're going to get tested early with that one.
Well, and the sneaky part of what we saw last year,
because believe me, Cole Payton is going to keep coming.
Yeah.
Like, that's who he is.
Yeah.
Right? He'd make the freak list for a reason.
Yeah.
He is freaky.
And he is, he's NDSU's Taysom Hill, or however you want to put it.
Yeah, man.
Like
He's like that's a tough football team.
Yeah, and to me, those are the teams that Colorado can't deal with.
Yeah, so
I don't think they're built that way.
I just that game is so big, and I'm not running from it.
No, you have to be able to say it out loud and go get it.
You know, it's a game you got to win.
That's the next step as a program for Nebraska.
You have to win those games.
Is being able to say out loud, hey, this is a must-win game, or this is a game that's important for our program, and then be able to go get it.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that's not something that's happened a lot in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of those games where Nebraska either circles it or it's a big game on the calendar and they don't show up.
I just wish, like just from a human interest thing and like people's perspective, like sometimes just go along to get along.
Mm-hmm.
Like not everything has to be a teachable moment or a point of contention.
Mm-hmm.
Like just keep it moving.
Did you also get the sense like
use it all the time? What is it?
See that he wanted us to know, like, stop throwing around chemistry. But when a coach does it, and that was the one thing that I didn't really have a problem with.
I had a problem with
everything else was bugging me because I'm like, oh, he wants to fight.
Yeah.
He
was
wants
picking.
He wants to
He was
fight.
picking for a fight.
But the chemistry thing, I was actually like, okay, I get his point. Especially when he dropped the mic with, man, some of you don't have chemistry at home, and you go to that.
Here's my problem though, is the guy identified what he meant as chemistry.
But that wasn't his point though. So like he wasn't trying to say like he didn't know what it was.
Right.
He wanted you, the asker of the question, to explain. He knew.
The home comment was a little much. I mean, that was a little personal right there.
Well,
so don't
I don't want to
don't go down
this
the
is gonna
personal
sound like in
road.
defensive because I thought the thing was a disaster.
It was a disaster.
But that part I didn't mind because we do use so we use chemistry so often.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when we went through this stint here? Like, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Remember how like people would roll their eyes when we used the term chemistry and culture?
So the answer
to that question is yes.
If
you
he
remember.
had said culture, I'd be more on the same page with you.
Yeah.
That's where I'm making a distinction here. We can come back and get this in the 8:00 hour because we do have it open. We rescheduled Sam for tomorrow. He had a scheduling conflict.
Was he got his umbrella? Rain? First day of school? LPS starts school today?
I don't know. I can't believe that people started school last week. That's still freaking me out.
Yeah.
But we'll come back and get this because I do think there's a difference.
Okay.
Between chemistry and culture.
I'm here for it.
In that question. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We're dealing with Deion Sanders here this morning. And here's where, we were talking about the difference between culture and chemistry in that context here. And here's why I wanted to make that distinction, because you're right. A handful of years ago, especially whether it was the Frost era, a lot of it was during Frost, right? Was, they don't have the culture right. And we would kind of use this word and nobody really knew what it meant, right? Nobody really knew what we were saying. It was sort of this intangible, boogeyman that Nebraska didn't have. And it was always the issue because we couldn't figure out why they couldn't stop turning the ball over or making dumb penalties or whatever, right? So we're just like, it's a culture thing. That's not, I don't think, what the question was about, because he specifically asks, before he says the word chemistry, he says working in unison. And he's talking specifically about the offensive line. To me, that's a legitimate football question. Is your offensive line, you've got a lot of new pieces. How are they gelling together? How are they working together? And then he calls it chemistry. To me, that's just a football question. That's not a, if he had said culture, if he's like, hey, how's the culture? Maybe he's referencing the Athlon article or something like that. When he's asking about how a unit with a lot of new pieces is working in unison, chemistry is the proper word in that context, I think. So I didn't have a problem with that question.
Okay.
At all. I thought that made a lot of sense, and Deion decided to pick at it because he was on one.
Yeah. So that question still doesn't bother me or how he answered that question, because I do think we use it real casually. Right? I just do. I think when we see something that doesn't look the way that we want it to, or act the way that we think it should act.
Sure.
Especially when it's multiple people.
or it's stuff we don't understand.
We call it chemistry.
So here's the only reason I push back on it is in that question, I thought he used it properly. I didn't think he was using it as a boogeyman.
No, so I don't. Are you talking about
The guy that asked the question, I
Yeah.
thought he was using it very specifically and not as a catch-all.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So that's why I had a problem
So
with like Dion
His-
taking
he-
it from the question.
the one step further.
Yes.
Okay, so that's my question. All right, so you're talking about the home thing.
Yes.
Okay, so that you're saying that was
I
unnecessary.
thought it was out of line. And I also thought, okay, so this guy asked a very specific question about the offensive line and how they're working together.
Yeah.
Right. And then he took it to be like,
as an unneeded teachable moment.
yes, because
Okay.
he seems the vibe that I get
I'm
from
with you.
Dion is that he always
with
thinks he's the smartest guy in the
I'm
room.
with you. Like he could have just stopped there,
He could have just been like, hey, yeah, they're coming together nicely. Because
or
he was
coulda-
asking a
he
football
could
question.
he could have stopped after the unison and have a general like for one another.
Yeah.
Because so the problem where I was going with this
Yeah.
is he brought stuff to the press conference.
Mhm.
Like he brought his own, I'm not even going to give the luggage reference. He brought his
We're
own.
going to call it baggage. In a good sense, it's luggage. In a bad sense, it's baggage.
He brought some things that he wanted to address to that press conference that he didn't need. He couldn't compartment. He couldn't stay in the moment.
No.
So that was like.
And instead of giving like an opening statement where he was just like, hey, there's some things I want to talk
That's
about.
the thing. That's what I said. That's what I was going to say going in the break where I was like, revisionist history says just make the statement and get it out of the way.
100%.
Then just answer the questions. But he had the issues and he was trying to get them resolved through the questions that were being asked.
I also,
You know what I mean?
I do, yes. But I also think the reason, like, I think maybe I'm giving him too much credit here, which is not something I do a lot with Dion. But I also think he has like an axe to grind with certain media members, as we've seen. And so I think he wanted to do it through the questions so he could grind that axe.
And the part that's getting cut out of there, and I don't know how we got on this for this many segments, except for it's good to talk about what the antithesis looks like too, because you go back to what Mike Farrell said a couple of weeks ago in the article is why he'll take Coach Rule's culture over this is if it gets hectic, it has to be about something other than you.
Yeah.
Right? Like it just does. Like that's the only way you can get through. And so for him, if his team is like that, or if they pick up on that from him,
which you would think they would, that's typically what happens.
Then it makes it what he's basically saying is, I act like this because someone made me. And I'm just like, generally speaking, I act like this because somebody made me or somebody did something to me.
It's the lack of accountability thing.
And you know that, see, that's the biggest pet peeve for me.
Me too.
It's not even
like take ownership.
So sure, the lack of accountability, but I like until you cannot, there is no conflict resolution until you admit your role in whatever happened.
Yeah, you participated.
What could I do differently?
It's my 1%
It
rule.
doesn't even have to be wrong.
No, it's my 1% rule.
It's what could I have done differently to keep this from getting to where it
to
got.
have made this a better situation.
Because
people want to make it about blame, and it doesn't have to be about blame.
And how many times do you think you can talk somebody into submission of guilt?
Yeah. Not
you're
very
gonna
long.
you're gonna go through a point of contentiousness, right?
Yeah,
and it's counterproductive.
You're not going to have a very good relationship for very long.
So what you just hope people do in the short term is like, okay, what could I have done differently? Believe me, like there's things that I want to say in defense of sometimes when it's but this is, or you know what, this is the real backstory. I know how this may have looked, but at the end of the day, it's just like, okay, do I fight this thing or do I just look at this as like, okay, what could I have done differently?
Yeah.
Because and the reason that I land on that is not some self-righteousness. It's just that it doesn't even have to be me. I would want somebody to do that if they're dealing with me. I want our football team just this morning, right? It could have been about a lot of other things like the weather or the start time or wet clothes or wet balls or whatever.
Coach, we're never going to play a game at 5:30 in the morning. It doesn't matter.
Things go a lot smoother.
Yeah.
When the first person says, what could I have done differently?
Could have done that better.
Yeah.
Well,
right,
and
right.
So
like,
I think the people make a
So that's why I gravitate.
Yes.
It's not so I can be right.
No.
It's so whatever, if you're in the outcomes, if you're in the solutions business, it just helps you get solutions. And now he's everywhere.
Yeah.
So now Colorado's everywhere. And what do people
and not
say?
in a good way.
People, oh man, they're the most relevant 4-win team ever. And which is fine because that used to be Nebraska.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Best
so
3-9 team of all time.
So I always look at it. It's like, okay, let them clean up their own house. Don't get distracted by that.
Yeah.
People have been trying to pull Coach Rule into this national media.
Not interested.
He's just not interested.
Yeah, because he's got enough stuff on his own.
Yeah. Like, what could I do differently?
Yeah.
He clearly was not in a good mood Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, maybe he was tired. I don't know. But he was
That wasn't the normal Coach Rule that we get.
Nope.
He's usually a lot more affable.
And so he's got to be able to go back and ask himself, okay, what could I have done differently?
So the reason that's important to me, I think, is it's not about taking blame, right? What it's about is, what's the thing we always talk about? We can't control the things that happen to us. We can control the things about how we can react.
Big E plus R equals OK.
Right? Like, we can control how we react to the things that happen to us.
The event, not the response, the outcome.
Yes.
Only one of those you have control over.
Response.
Your R.
That's it. Right? That's the only thing you have any control over. Right? You hope that produces a certain outcome. Right? But it's hope.
Hey, and sometimes you get the outcome first.
Yes. Right? Like, and so, but that's what we're talking about here is the taking, like, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? It's not about even taking blame. When I talk about accountability, I'm not like, oh, you have to take blame for everything. Mm-hmm. You're taking ownership for whatever role you participated in the situation, right? Because anytime you're there, you're participating in some role or fashion, right? Whether it's actively, whether it's passively, if you are present.
And you're less apt to blame too.
Yes, you're less apt to blame other people.
Yeah. And
if you take ownership over a situation as much as you can, frankly, other people are less likely to blame you.
Yep.
Because if you're this is human nature, and it's certainly true of me. If I see somebody being like dodgy about a situation and they're kind of trying to, they're trying to do their best like Floyd Mayweather and like miss the punches a little bit and not try and take any sort of ownership or responsibility over a situation, I'm more likely to think that situation is their fault. I just am.
Yeah.
Like, if I see somebody being sort of sketchy about it, it's like, what are you hiding from right now?
Yeah.
Because like it's this thing it's my 1% rule. You may only have a 1% impact on the situation that happened there, but like, you do better in your 1%. Mm-hmm. You may have a 90% impact on the situation that happened there. So do better in your 90%.
What you hope though is you've got a culture that is created where you have to trust that if you say something out loud, people can receive that too. Mm-hmm. Like, there has to be this environment. Gosh, I've looked at that play, that inch thing over and over and over in the Olympics.
Yeah, the women's gold medal game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it's 1/10 of 100 on a gymnastics score or a photo finish in a sprint.
5,000th of a second in a sprint.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, it's like, so if I say, hey, what about your 1%? Mm-hmm. It can't be that I don't think I have any responsibility in it.
100%. You have to trust.
You have to trust
that the person giving you that information
is for you
and is also going to do the same things they're asking of you.
100%.
Like, that's the thing that Coach Rule brings to the table.
It's why it's how he can talk to his staff the way that he does,
and to his players,
and vice versa.
Right?
Yeah.
Because how many times have we said this? He's not going to ask you to do anything he's not willing to do, even to the point where, like, they're running with the team when something goes poorly. He's not going to ask you to do anything he's not willing to do. That's why he can go up and talk about a guy like Prince Will and be like, yeah, it's not about talent there.
Hey, listen, so is it just me, or is that's the third time in the last week the same message about the same guy has been talked about?
That was the most on the nose.
What did he talk about? He said with him, it's going to be about his process.
His process. Does he take care of his body? How hard does he go in practice?
Which we heard from
Tony White.
I
think we also heard it from Terrence
Knighton.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, it's And obviously it's a conversation they've had with Prince Will. Otherwise, they wouldn't be saying it to us.
Yep.
Right? That's the other thing that I appreciate about this staff is I have 100% confidence if we hear something from them, it's already been talked about privately.
And can I just tell you, as a player or like as a coach, it is so refreshing.
Yeah.
Because you're not caught off guard.
Yeah, he's not throwing anybody under the bus here.
So guess what? The beauty of it is, you want to go back to the 1%?
Yeah.
All right. What could I do different?
Yeah. And listen, Coach Rule told him what he could do different, right? There's not a lot of ambiguity there. He was real specific. I've got it written down because it stuck out to me.
Shane, it is clip. Gosh, I don't know if you cut that one up.
Well, I've got it right here. This is almost word for word. Prince Will's career will be defined by his process, his taking care of his body, his preparing, his work ethic in terms of how he practices and how hard he plays. The talent is everywhere, and he's a great, great, great young man.
Mm-hmm.
Loyal, family guy. Last year, you're a freshman. You have some success, some streaky success. You get some awards. Your second year now you got to do every day, every rep. That's where guys make the jump. So not only, here's the thing that I like about this. He also does the compliment sandwich thing a little bit here, right?
So we call it the spice and the sugar.
Yeah.
Right? You say something, it's like, ow. But then you throw them a little sugar.
Yeah.
You say something, it's like, ugh.
And then you pull a solve on it,
throw them a little sugar, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He goes and he does he doesn't even say anything bad about Prince Will, he's not working very hard whatever.
Did you get the sense that any of that was something Prince Will hasn't heard before?
Not even for a second. Yeah. I never get that sense.
Now, the thing of it is now, see, that was the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
The events, if we're going E plus R equals O, the events led to an outcome.
Yeah.
The outcome the outcome is people for the third coach in a row is saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do I respond to that?
Yeah.
I'm mad that they're
and maybe that will
they're
be
putting me out there.
Maybe it will be. I don't know.
But you hope it's okay. What's my role in this?
Yeah. And
it's not that they disseminated the information. That's why it's always weird when people could know that they're acting a certain way,
mm-hmm.
and you call it that.
And then they get mad.
And then they're mad
that you called it the thing that they know they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like, how does that even make sense?
Like if I went to Dion.
If you know you're doing things that promote immaturity, and someone calls you immature, that's not personal.
No. It's observation.
It's like
you guys use it all the time. What is it?
It's
basic observation. Like if I went to a Dion.
So if somebody asks Dion, hey, why are you being so defiant?
Yeah. Or if I was like, hey, I understand you're trying to make teachable moments. You see, you're coming off a little condescending.
Yeah, you guys.
I don't know. How are you going to call me condescending? I'm just looking at I'm just looking at the context clues.
Right.
We all know what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying it. I'm just calling it what it is. Like if he said, "Why are you being so contentious?"
Yeah.
Well, you calling me content? Like, no, that's what this is. Like
you're being contentious.
Everything has turned into a back and forth battle.
Yeah, he's choosing to fight over everything.
So that's part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you don't like the way practice went, and man, those are poor practice habits.
Yeah.
You saying I practice poorly?
Like, oh, you think I'm lazy? Or you don't think I practice well? It's like, no, you could be going really hard, but you might have bad habits.
Yeah, those are poor practice habits.
Yeah.
I'm saying you just have to be able.
Yeah, there's a maturity there. You have to be able to process that information without thinking it's a personal attack.
And we see it all the time in conflict resolution, right? Especially when it's.
Yeah, this isn't just a sports thing. This is like an everybody thing.
It's life.
Yeah.
It's.
By the way,
that was pretty inconsiderate that you did X, Y, and Z. Oh, so now I'm inconsiderate.
By the way, does the door swing both ways when it comes to it? When it comes to the coach and the reporter? So if the coach can act that way to the reporter, will we see it down the road? The reporter.
So this is the hard part, and I saw this on social media a lot, right? Especially, Dion has some staunch supporters. I see this in
mm-hmm.
social media, either whether it's TikTok or X. So this is what happens. So the reporters will not say anything combative in nature real time.
Mhm.
Because it's counterproductive to what their job is.
Yeah, they're
Makes
still
sense.
trying to do a job.
okay.
Okay.
So a reporter will in turn, like Keeler,
Just go write about it.
he'll go write about it. And then inevitably people will say, oh man, hiding behind the phone or the keyboard or the typewriter. And it's like, that person, he or she has a job to do.
Mhm.
It's okay if they talk about what happened. It doesn't make them anything except for talking about what happened. But people will be mad at the report because they want you to say something to him real time. It's just like what happens in interviews.
Mhm.
We'll be doing an interview and somebody will say something that somebody didn't agree with. And inevitably, if you're on the other side, it was, well, why didn't you challenge him?
Yeah.
Why didn't you question him? Right. Number one, you have to get a feel for the conversation and who you're dealing with.
Mhm.
Number two is, how productive will it be to the overall product real time? And number three, can I go back and get it later?
Yeah.
If I go back and get it later, I don't want to hear, well, why didn't you tell them that real time? Sometimes if you don't have an opening, you can't do it. Like this is like 101.
Also, like
it's 101.
there's also like a sense of, and I think you can tell, like, okay,
How will they receive the pushback?
yes,
Yeah.
if I go and get this here,
Yeah.
is this going to just completely derail everything,
yeah.
right? And if you've got other things you need to talk about, like that's going to be counterproductive. The other thing is, like
if for instance,
Mhm.
right? If Sam says Oregon's D-line is undersized, right? I don't agree that they're undersized.
yeah, I don't particularly feel that way.
Okay. For me to say that then is that counterproductive to the overarching
larger point
of what I think he's trying to make.
Yeah.
Right?
Or the overarching point of what we're trying to do in the interview, right?
100%.
Because sometimes somebody
it happens all the time.
sometimes somebody will say something in passing, right? I do it all the time. I say stuff like real casually in passing and then move on.
Yeah.
And,
And do I want to get in the habit of picking at every little thing?
right, because then you sound like Dion.
You know,
But I also like, you understand that like sometimes I'm just gonna throw a little quip or a joke in there. It may not be accurate, but I think it's funny.
and
then I move
and
on.
you wouldn't want to be around me.
Nobody would. I mean, like nobody wants to be around that guy. Like
You
that's
know-
why I kind of make fun of the well actually guy, right? I love Steven. He's a great listener and a great friend of the show. But like there are people that do it with every little thing that
Oh, yeah.
can't let anything go.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And it's like that's why I kind of make the well actually joke, because there's people that like that's the only thing you get from them.
Mhm.
Where it's like, well, I'm gonna correct this, I'm gonna correct this, I'm gonna correct this. And it's like I need you to be able to move on when it doesn't matter.
Shane, can you play? It's the teachable moment. I lost the clip, but go back and get clip 6 from Coach Rule.
Yeah, Tristan's in the 120. He's kicking. Today for the kickers was, yesterday was a big special teams day along with today, but we still keep them on rotation. So one day it's, one guy. Today those guys both got a couple kicks. Here's what I'll say: we're pretty consistent. I don't know how far out we can go and be consistent, but in my opinion, in college football, you want to be reliable inside the 30. With the ball inside the 30, and you want to be reasonable out to like the 35, 36. And, it should be automatic from the 25. And so I feel like right now we're getting to be where we're pretty automatic from the 25, and then we're pretty, reliable inside the 30. So we're getting there. And I think, we have some guys who can really kick off and affect the game that way.
Is that the one you wanted?
That was cut 6. Sorry.
I wanted the teachable moment clip, how we labeled it, but it's okay. I'll go back and find it.
I'll say we can go back and find that one, but there's a different, like you kind of have to pick your moments. Like you have to pick your spots.
That's how'd you know where I was going?
We've done this a lot.
You do, because nobody wants to hear it all the
Yeah,
time.
you can't constantly be providing,
and you can't always be that guy
Yes.
or gal either, right?
because then that also erodes trust.
Yeah.
Whether you're right or not.
Because you get in that defeatist mode, right?
Yes.
I can't do
anything right.
I can't say anything.
I can't do anything right.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
really hard, no matter how much you want to take ownership, no matter how much you want to be like, okay, what can I do different? If that's all you ever hear from a person, whose opinion you value, and it is a leadership position over you, it is really hard after a certain point. Like there is a point of diminishing returns. There's a breaking point where all you hear is this person doesn't think I can do anything right. That's where you get to. That's why the compliment sandwich is important with Prince Will, right? What are
that's a good point.
Like the things that he said were like, hey, this guy's got all the talent in the world. This guy had a good freshman year. Like he had success his freshman year. Compliment. He's said great 3 times. Great young man. Loyal and family guy. We're up to like 4 or 5 compliments. The only thing, and his criticism isn't even really a criticism. All it is a definition of like
what he meant by process.
How Prince Will can get better.
Did you hear Coach Payton? Did you hear Sean Payton talk about his quarterbacks?
A little bit.
So, like the takeaways from that would lead me to be encouraged to be a quarterback that is looking forward to week 2.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Conversely, if you're listening to who was like O'Connell talk about Darnold to McCarthy.
Yeah.
If you're Sam Darnold, you're probably like, I don't know. This may be inevitable.
Yeah. What am I going to do? Am I going to be here week 2?
You know what I mean? The NFL quarterback was interesting.
We got more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. And speaking of Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, you can join us 4 times throughout the football season, starting on August 30th before the UTEP game for our live breakfast shows presented by EP Foundation Repair. If you want to be a part of that, you can get breakfast. You can also get some, morning cocktails if you're having a nice casual Friday with us. Go to eventbrite.com, search for Hurrdat Sports Radio to get tickets. First one coming up August 30th before UTEP. I want to put a bow on this kind of Deion conversation before we move into some NFL stuff that I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there too. But Amazing Daniel on Twitter, I don't like to give him credit too much, but every once in a while he, there's a saying about, every once in a while, broken clock's right twice a day.
Yeah.
That's my guy. Amazing. No, we love Daniel. But he brought up a good point, I thought, about the chemistry comment that Deion made. He says the home life example didn't make sense. If you have bad chemistry at home, you're not going to have long-term success. What's he saying? That they don't care about chemistry? He made it about liking each other, which isn't the same as chemistry. I thought that was a really good point on a couple fronts. Like, that hurts me to say. He made a couple good points in the same tweet. Was number one, if you don't have good chemistry, you're not going to have long-term success. Whether it's a radio show, whether it's a football team, whether it's your marriage or your family at home. If you don't have good chemistry, you're not going to have long-term success. Full stop, right? Secondly, he did kind of make it about liking each other over chemistry, right? There's a difference between, there's days where I like certain members of my family more than others, but I love them all, right? It's just like, hey, we're having a tough day today. You're maybe not my favorite person today, but there's still the love and admiration or whatever else Deion was saying there, right? You can still have good chemistry even when you are not that person's not your favorite person that day. I think there's truth there. And honestly, if you aren't able to overcome, liking someone is, I think, fleeting, right? It comes and goes and whatever, right? But chemistry, if you've got a good working relationship with someone, is something that can last a little bit longer. And if you don't have that on a football team, good luck. Whether it's coaches to players, whether it's players to players, good luck with that.
Let me ask one. I just want to ask one other question on this. Does it matter that he was smiling through this?
No, he smiles all the time. He's always smiling when he gives those answers because he thinks he's being a genius.
I think a lot of it is he's just a guy that is not used to. He's not, in his opinion, and maybe this is marriage advice aside, hasn't had too many flub ups.
Sure, he's been very successful through most of his life.
So you just develop this sense of belief. And I think for him, you let him tell it, his story wasn't always the most glorious to tell, right?
Yeah.
Where, nobody was watching his high school games and his mom had to work and stepdad was doing this thing. And, real dad was so he said, and he tells the story of how he had to create prime time to survive. I take him at his word for that. I mean, who am I? But I think a lot of that's what you hear when he's backed into a corner.
Mhm.
He's going to do him because what I always say, it's the egg principle. Whatever's in you, when you get squeezed,
That's what's coming out.
that's what's coming out.
But here's
like if you're mean spirited, when you're squeezed, you're gonna be mean spirited. If you like problem solving and you get squeezed, you're gonna try to solve the problem. Like, it doesn't matter what it is.
no, but whatever's inside is coming out.
It's coming out.
Here's the thing that I would kind of bring up though, because I think you're right. I think there is a part of his personality that served him incredibly well in previous portions of his life,
Mhm.
and that's what we're continuing to see. But it kind of goes back to the thing we talked about last week, when you're talking about guys that became really high level prospects or really high level football players doing a thing one way. And then you come to Nebraska and it's like, hey, no, we need you to eat like this. We need you to work like this. We need you to act differently than what got you here. At a certain point, the thing that got you to this point doesn't get you to the next level all the time.
It can.
Yeah, it's not always.
I think negotiating, because what you're talking about is trust.
Yeah, 100%.
Like you're really talking about, like, if Deion trusted that question was coming from a good place,
Mhm.
he probably would answer it differently.
Yeah.
Even if it goes against his natural tendency.
But
Like-
here's my question.
So
Who does Deion trust besides Deion?
I don't know. I don't know. But I'm saying the reason that you can ask me that question is part of what I'm talking about in terms of how he's
Mhm.
been raised.
Yeah.
Right? Like those survival things kick in, and it's like, well, nobody's going to do this for me.
Yeah.
I got to do this. He was allowed to play in a defense where he got to do his own thing.
Mhm.
Now, you could easily, if you said, man, DB, those qualities don't make for good coaches. Listen, you might be right,
A lot of times they don't.
right? Because you have to be pretty other-centered
To be a good coach.
to be a good coach.
Yeah.
But
least
still have
long-term.
conviction in
What you believe.
your methodology.
100%. Yeah.
So it's like, for is controlling, that's probably too strong of a word, but for all knowing
Mhm.
and all handsy as Coach Rule is, there has to be this thing that kind of goes against his nature, which is,
To trust his guys to do their job.
if I'm going to hire you, because what he would probably tell you
Mhm.
is, and it goes back to the individual thing, I trust me.
Mhm.
So if I trust me and I picked you,
Then I have to trust you.
then I got to trust you.
Yeah. Because guess who? Because
So
it is.
even though it
'Cause-
starts with the singular individual process,
but it's the logical conclusion to that
yeah,
process.
right? It's like,
Like if he picks Tony White and he trusts Tony White, then he has to allow Tony White
yeah,
to choose John Butler.
if I am who I said I am,
If I am, yeah,
that's part of the deal, right?
yes.
It's very, very, in my opinion, it's very, very difficult to do, but that is like good leadership 101.
And it's one of the things I appreciate about him is the logical consistency within the things he says and within the things he does. It drives me crazy when people say they're about one thing and then it breaks down when things
we were having a conversation about like the practice or the scrimmage or whatever, and I said, hey, you got bigger things to do, man, whatever. And he's like, today I don't do anything.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, you keep telling yourself that, right? Like that leads to like longevity and health, and you don't stress. You
Yeah.
know? And I get I'm laughing, but I know what he's saying.
Yeah. If he's done his job,
Today's not about me.
today should not be a day that he has to do much.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
Right? Like there is I know I firmly believe this when I was coaching, which is if you have prepared people the right way, and we hear this all the time with Nebraska guys too. If you've prepared guys the right way, there should be like game day should be your reward.
Mhm.
Like it should be the easy part of the equation. I know people, like you guys and your teams from the 90s used to talk about this all the time. Game days were easy,
Mhm.
right? Those were
100%.
those were like day off is too aggressive, but in terms of the work,
Yeah.
like that was the carrot.
You much rather play a game than go to practice.
Yeah, the game day was the carrot, right? Like the practice was the stick. Game day was the carrot, right? So, like if you're a coach and you haven't done your work during the week, yeah, game day is going to be real stressful because you didn't do the work during the week.
Yeah, because I think like
Same things for players too.
like at some point, if you're going to operate like that, and let's say, like if I want to take Shane with me wherever I go,
Mhm.
right? in crunch time, I have to let Shane be Shane. Like there are some things Shane will tell me about either production or getting a clip up or getting something ready, where even if I kind of disagree with it, I know, okay, he's better at his job than I am.
Yeah, he knows.
Right?
He knows more about producing than I do.
And I want this guy with me. So
Oh, come on, Shane.
I in turn have to let him do that.
Yeah, you have to trust him to do a job.
Sometimes that's not always easy.
Yeah. No,
right?
it's
Like,
I hear you.
but it's the right but it's the right thing to do if you want to be able to work with somebody for 20 years.
100%. It's the right thing to do if
or
you,
however long it's been.
Well, and you don't like there is a level of like you can't operate like being a control freak all the time with everything, right? There's certain things you have to let go, right? Like if I was trying to stick to our rundown every day, I would lose my mind.
Yeah.
Right? Because like that's just not how like I want to do a show with you. I understand like we're going to chase squirrels. Like it's fine. I'm going to chase squirrels. You're going to chase squirrels. There's going to be rabbit holes. It's great. If I was like married to the rundown, this would be a really hard job to do.
Yeah.
Like it would be. Whereas if you're just like, hey, I trust that if I get into a conversation with DB, it's going to be better than what I wrote down. Right? That's kind of like that's.
I don't care. Careful.
Well, it'll be more entertaining. We'll see if it's going to be better.
Got a couple clips we got to roll through.
We do. We also, coming up next, are going to talk to our friend Brian Fonseca. He covers Rutgers. We're covering Nebraska's opponents. We're going to talk to Arif Hasan at 9 o'clock as well to talk some NFL.
A lot in there in NFL.
We got a lot going on. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Brian Fonseca. He covers Rutgers for the Star Ledger as well as NJ Advanced Media. Brian, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me on.
I appreciate it, Brian. Part of it is out of fear. This was one of those games, like full disclosure, when I looked at because I'm sure my partner will tell you this and he'll make fun of me. Rutgers is one of the teams that I've talked about all offseason because I've said, well, I think these guys are going to be a lot better than maybe the national perception. This is the classic. You play them a certain way, and it's hard to out Rutgers the way that Rutgers can play. Is there a fair amount of truth to that, even though I get it, they're part of the home deal, but objectively, is there something to that thought process?
Yeah, I think you are hitting the nail right on the head in multiple ways. One, I think Rutgers for its entire being in the Big Ten was seen as kind of an easy out for most teams, and that was true for, most of the time since they've been in the Big Ten. But now the pendulum's kind of swung this offseason where you got Kirk Herbstreit, you got Dan Wetzel, and you got national guys saying that Rutgers is a college football playoff dark horse, which I'd say is a bit much at this point. But Rutgers is improved. They had a breakout year last year. They broke a 10-year bowl drought, made it to a bowl game, beat Miami in a bowl game, and they bring back a ton of guys on both sides of the ball from that team. So that brings a lot of optimism to these guys, and these guys understand exactly what you said, that Rutgers wins a certain way, especially under Greg Schiano. They control the ball as much as they can. They run it hard. They play strong defense, and they don't make mistakes, and they win on special teams, and they do all the little things. Rutgers will never blow anybody out with an explosive offense. At least I don't see that happening, certainly not this season, but they will do their best not to beat themselves and force other opponents to beat themselves. And I think, again, Rutgers does that really well, and I think they bring back a lot of guys who know how to do that.
Brian, you bring up a really interesting point with kind of stylistically what Rutgers is trying to do. And we've seen this model work in the Big Ten most successfully with Iowa, where you kind of grimy games up a little bit. You don't have an explosive offense, but it also leads to a lot of kind of what I would call coin flip games, right? We have our friend over at Matrix Analytical who does these breakdowns of these teams, and he's got Rutgers with 6 what he calls toss-up games that he projects within 4 points one way or the other, and it makes Rutgers one of the biggest variance teams in the country this year. Can you see both sides of that where, like, hey, yeah, if they're able to get this thing locked in and they're able to win most of those toss-up games, they could be in that 8-9 win category, and if for some reason those get away from them, this could go the other direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a perfect encapsulation of what this season is. Everyone sees the schedule and sees that there's no Ohio State, no Penn State, no Michigan, the three teams that beat them up every year for the past 10 years. And the schedule is objectively easier. And the schedule, the computers say Rutgers has the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, which is probably true. But Rutgers is not suddenly Ohio State where you play any team that's not the top two teams in the league and you have an easy afternoon. Rutgers is going to have to fight and claw to win a lot of these games, starting with Virginia Tech, which I think is really going to set the tone for the season of determining whether they will win these 50-50 toss-up games. I think a lot of people with optimism for this Rutgers season are on the positive side, half glass full. Rutgers will win a majority of these coin flip games. But I think, again, people don't want to think about this in July and August. To your point, you could lose a majority of these toss-up games, and the season could go anywhere from 9-3, 10-2 on the high end if all goes right to a 5-7 year, 6-6 where you're scraping by to a bowl game again. The Tech game, the Washington game to open Big Ten play, and then the trip to Nebraska are really going to set the tone for how the outlook of the season will be entering October, November.
Unfortunately, I can see some Calic-Manis scrambles breaking my heart for extended third down conversions and things like that. So I get what he brings to the table, but I love your backfield. I'm a big Bosco prep guy, so I love Kyle's style and how there's this thing about watching him run. This is the former nerdy running back in me. He's so patient and smooth to the hole. And it's like you wake up and it's 2nd and 5 and you think you fit the run game correctly on defense. And you're like, how is it 2nd and 5? And he's so patient. And then he's like on you. How Rutgersy is he when it comes to like, this is exactly how they want to play. You look up and it's like, how'd they do it?
Yeah, I think he's, again, I keep repeating this phrase, but a perfect encapsulation of a guy that succeeds in a Greg Schiano team, a guy who was underrated out of high school, probably a 3-star guy, seen as the second best running back at his team, next to Jalen Berger, who's on his 3rd Big Ten school at this point now at UCLA.
Yeah.
And Kyle Monangai just kind of, got big, got stronger, learned how to play in the offense. And exactly what you said is what Greg Schiano said at Big Ten Media Days. He's both patient and then explosive. He can wait for the opportunity, and when it's there, he kind of gets through, and he's tough to bring down. He led the Big Ten in missed tackles forced last year, according to PFF, and he's just a big body that he's kind of a bowling ball. When he gets the momentum, he's hard to bring down. So I think he is exactly what Rutgers, the success stories at Rutgers are, kind of a gritty guy who is the body of what Greg Schiano calls a developmental program. He was the leading force of that offense last year. He was really the reason they were able to have any success offensively last year. And while I think Calic-Manis will be an upgrade over Gavin Wimsatt at quarterback, I still would expect Kyle Monangai to really be the focal point and the guy who's kind of leading the charge offensively.
Yeah, that's teed up. Even I can hit this one. So the difference is with Cam and Ethan is it the ability to get a little more vertical in the passing game. McManus had a better arm than I think some of the critics gave him credit for, just because of the completion percentage. But he's capable.
Yeah, I think so. I think the biggest thing that Rutgers needs out of Ethan Calic-Manis is to do what Gavin Wimsatt couldn't do: complete the short passes, the 5-yard passes, the bubble screens, the slants. The completions you need to kind of move the chains. I don't think anyone expects him to be this deep ball threat. I do think he has a better arm than people expect, and a lot of his numbers last year at Minnesota weren't great because of wide receiver drops and things out of his control. So I think he'll be an upgrade over Gavin Wimsatt in accuracy, which he has to be, given that Gavin was the least accurate quarterback in FBS football 2 years in a row. But I'm not sure how much better he'll make the offense as far as explosion, but I think just by being able to nickel and dime it, that will be a major upgrade and will open things up for Kyle Monangai, because defenses are going to put 8 guys in the box and kind of make his life harder. So I think he'll improve this Rutgers offense in multiple ways. And Kirk Shiraka was the guy that brought him to Minnesota, has a lot of faith in him, and I think Greg Schiano believes in Kirk Shiraka, so that's why Ethan Calic-Manis is kind of the guy at this point.
Man, Brian, it sounds a lot like you're talking about Nebraska's quarterback situation as well when you're describing.
And we haven't even got to the defense, where I think they'll have the most similarities.
So let us get to the defense. Where do you think the strength of this defense is, and is there anywhere that if you had some questions or concerns, where would that be?
I think the strength is that they don't beat themselves. They were one of the best teams last year in the country in not allowing explosive plays and not allowing, one breakdown leads to an 80-yard touchdown, for example. They just would not beat themselves, and they would force teams to nickel and dime them and really, really work hard to score against them. They're not huge on takeaways. They're not a team that's going to, get 3 interceptions a game or anything to that effect, but they're just really, really solid, which I think, again, is a quintessential Greg Schiano team. The one question mark I would say is the pass rush. They really struggled to create pressure with just 4 guys last year. Greg Schiano has repeatedly mentioned that this offseason as a goal, to hope to create more pressure with their front without having to have extra help, from the second level. I think they have 2 bookend defensive ends in Aaron Lewis and Wesley Bailey, who are just absolutely filled with potential that just has not been lived up to yet. So I think they have a chance to, Wesley Bailey's healthy this year after dealing with an injury.
And Lewis can be a monster.
Yes, I think you could clearly see watching the guy play just, first of all, his size, his length, his motor, it all feels like it's there. It just, for some reason, he has not put it together. And then I think a bigger question there is interiorly in the defensive line, on the defensive tackles, do they have enough guys who can create some pressure, stop the run, things like that? But that to me, that is one of the few question marks on that defense.
It is so funny because it is 6 degrees of separation. Nebraska fans right now are like, he said 4-man pressure, which we've heard all spring. We heard, upside on the edges. We've heard, don't take the ball away. Need to work on takeaways. But still, collectively, you keep plays in front of you. For the next step for this defense for you, will they have kind of the ability to take games over? We know they kept you in it. Is this a team that you think is capable of taking games over?
I'd have to see that to believe it. Again, I think the biggest thing here is you need to get a pass rush. You got to start affecting the quarterback more. The pressure numbers were fine, but the sack and tackles for loss numbers were just not there. I think that's where it starts. And then, listen, I think they have a really good quarterback in Robert Longerbeam. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's going to be getting a lot of picks. And they have a lot of solid guys in the back end at safety, but I'm just not sure how many of those guys are real ball hawks. I just think this is going to be a defense that, again, is going to make opponents work really, really hard and hold them to just few enough points that the offense can overtake them. That's to me, that's the formula for victory for Rutgers this year.
Schiano loves special teams. Another good year of that?
I think so. They continued their Australian punter pipeline. Got this kid named Jacob Anderson out of top Pro Kick Australia. And I blindly believe any guy with an Australian accent punting the ball at Rutgers. So I'm sure he'll be fine. Jay Patel, the kicker, is back. He set the program record last year for most accurate field goal percentage in program history for a single season. I think he'll be good. And they upgraded at long snapper, which a sneaky position Rutgers struggled in last year. Got this kid Austin Riggs out of BYU with an interesting backstory. Did a Mormon mission in Zimbabwe. Talked to him all about that. So he's an interesting guy, and I think he'll be able to kind of fix some of the snafus they had at long snapper last year. So, and obviously, as always, this is a punt block team. Max Melton was one of the best punt blockers Rutgers had last year. He's gone to the NFL, but Greg Schiano will find some other guy who's speedy off the edge, who will block 2 or 3 punts that will lead to game-changing plays this year, because he always does.
That's Brian Fonseca, covers Rutgers for New Jersey Advanced Media and the Star Ledger. Thank you, Brian. We'll talk to you again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right, we are joined now on the phone by Arif Hasan. We apologize for the technical issues. Arif, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I am good. Ravi's making fun of me because he thinks I have some hot takes. But I'm just pitting this, Arif, because in the offseason, the draft, we were like, okay, who's going to panic? Who's going to make a reach at quarterback? And we talked about this for months. But I felt like, and I get it, only week 1, but I felt like this group is pretty A-okay. I just looked at command and poise, and I joked with Ravi. I said, listen, I ended up getting cut twice. I thought I could make a team after week 1, so I'm not going to overdo it. But I think the quarterback play was better than I thought going into this weekend. What did you think?
Yeah, I was actually pretty surprised. Even,
Me too.
Players who ended up turning out pretty good ended up having pretty bad preseasons. I remember C.J. Stroud had a pretty bad preseason. And so to see, all 6 of these guys, I mean, obviously, we only got like 3 passes from Drake May, but like to see all of these guys, demonstrate pocket awareness, move up into the pocket, drive the ball into tighter windows than you'd expect some of them to be able to do. I mean, all 6 of these quarterbacks really showed that they seemingly, belong, which is not something I expected, going into this weekend. I thought, having 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round was a bit of an overreaction. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that a lot of these quarterbacks could hang.
I'll let Ravi take Penix Jr. because we were both fanboys. I'll take the one that not a lot of people like, but I loved him with his coach, and I loved his off-the-field stuff because covering the Big Ten, I would see Michigan a ton. How good do you think McCarthy could be with the tandem of his head coach, who, for all intents and purposes, appears to be quite the quarterback whisperer? J.J. McCarthy was a lot better, I think, than his critics maybe thought, even though it was pretty vanilla.
Yeah, no, and vanilla is a pretty good way to put it. He didn't start out wonderful. He threw a pick, and that pick was largely, in my opinion, his fault. I know that, later on, people said it was actually, the receiver for not, executing the scramble drill properly. I kind of disagree. But after that, I thought McCarthy did a really wonderful job bouncing back. He had another mistake where, he didn't sense the pocket pressure, and it turned out to be an incompletion instead of a sack fumble. But those were essentially the only 2 mistakes that he made. And immediately after those mistakes, he makes these big plays that require him to have a good understanding of everything that's going on around him. His bullets are flying. A deep pass to Christian Jackson, the very same receiver that he threw that pick to for that first touchdown of the third quarter, and then he had another touchdown that he threw in the very same quarter. I thought that, for the most part, he demonstrated some of the stuff that a lot of people are concerned about. He doesn't have a ton of touch, generally speaking. Here in this game, he did. Still some room to improve there, but definitely improvement overall. That deep ball worked out really well for him. I know a lot of people had questions about that. And I thought, aside from, what I mentioned was nearly a sack fumble, his pocket presence and pocket manipulation was really, really good. His ability to step onto the pocket against edge pressure or shuffle to the side against interior pressure, maintain a stable platform in order to throw, his poise in general, his ability to stand tall in the pocket and deliver a throw knowing he's going to get hit. All of those things, really showed up in a big way, and it seems like he's got a little bit more big play potential than we saw at Michigan, which I think is really huge for him.
Arif, you brought something up there with JJ that I think is really interesting, and it's how he bounced back from his mistakes, right? I think that's something that you mentioned, his poise, that we thought he might be able to bring from Michigan. How important was it for you to see that translate, even if it is just in a preseason game?
Yeah, I think it's important because everybody's going to make mistakes, or everybody's going to have mistakes happen around them. And to maintain an even keel and to allow that to motivate you rather than bring you down, that's a really, really difficult thing for a player at any position, but especially a quarterback when there's so much on you. I know that after the game, he said that after he threw that pick, it was actually kind of freeing. And I kind of understand that because now he's not tight about having made a mistake. And I think that's a really good response to that instead of, being so concerned about making a mistake that once you make it, you get down on yourself, you realize, oh, hey, that happened. I'm over it. Now I can get past that and just start playing football. And that's exactly what he did. He played a much freer version of football. And so having the ability to do that, knowing that mistakes are going to happen, especially as a rookie in the NFL, I think that's tremendous.
Yeah, it's funny how this hindsight thing works. A couple of weeks ago, whether it's a guy bringing a purse to a meeting or not participating in a Hall of Fame game, or here we go with the eccentric whatever from Caleb Williams, it's, gosh, you could have made the case that Jaden Daniels, he was right there with the top quarterback pick because of all the reports out of the Commanders. I watched both of them. I think they're both going to be really good, but I've got no problems with Caleb Williams, especially watching the older guys like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, who can be a little surly, kind of gravitate towards Caleb Williams, and his talent didn't disappoint, right? Even his ball handling, he looks like a pro's pro from a fundamental standpoint. Do I even worry about if he can do the simple? I know he can do the spectacular, but do I worry about if he can do the simple?
I don't think so. Man, Caleb Williams looks so good, huh?
It was incredible, I thought.
Yeah, if I were going to rank all of the rookie quarterback performances, Caleb Williams is right there at the top. I mean, it was just truly a really remarkable thing. Now, they did, make sure that he was in his comfort zone more often than not. There was a lot of bootlegs, especially out to the right, where he's comfortable. And if he's going to be successful in the NFL, he's got to do kind of a wider portfolio of things than he did in this game. But of what he was asked to do, he executed at a really high level. And the thing that stands out, of course, is his ball placement. Just, where he was putting that thing. Goodness. I thought that he played outstandingly. Obviously, people talk about, his ability to extend the play and win the scramble and all that. But you talk about winning the simple, like he did a really great job of just executing the offense, what it was asking him to do. If that first read was marginally open, he gunned it right in there. And if it wasn't open, he'd move on, which is exactly what you want in a quarterback. That is the job. And so for him to be able to do kind of all of those things, manage, the offense really well, not just the pocket, not just figuring out who his first read, but everything within that offense, I thought that was just a really outstanding. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a much better, it's preseason week 1, right? But I don't know if I've seen a much better rookie debut than what I saw out of Caleb Williams. That was just incredible stuff.
And I'm hoping Robinson and Eckler can run the ball. But I liked Daniels a ton. I thought he was slight. I'm like, another 15, 20 pounds, and I may feel better. But off of run action, and if they could run the ball and protect a young offensive line, especially at left tackle, hard to find many guys that throw a better ball than Daniels.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Especially, the first, 6 or 7 passes were kind of whatever. He made a couple of mistakes kind of early on, which is fine. Again, at least a couple of other quarterbacks did that this week. But as soon as he kind of unleashed, you could see exactly why, Washington wanted him. You could see exactly, where, LSU's success came from as he was throwing the ball. And those deep passes were really divine. And the fact that, he audibled, I think it was like this 3rd and long, the long pass.
Oh, yeah, to get the one-on-one, yeah.
Yeah. He audibled out of it, and after the game, Dan Quinn was like, no, he didn't have permission to do that, but,
That's one of those, that's one of those forgiveness, not permission issues.
No, yes.
That's exactly what Dan Quinn said. It's forgiveness, not permission, and he did not sound remotely upset. So, it was good. Because it does mean that he has a lot of confidence in himself and what he's doing. He's got the talent to execute on that confidence, and he's got the pre-snap read, the intelligence to understand hey, this play is going to ask me to do this, and that's not what the look is giving me. So I'm gonna go into something that I know is going to be successful for us, and he does that without a hesitation. Everybody in the offense trusts him to do it, which shows the kind of leadership you need at the position. And then he executes for a touchdown. It was incredible. I'm using that word a lot, but it was a really great weekend for quarterbacks. I don't know what else to say.
We're talking with Arif Hasan from wideleft.football. I wanted to bring up the guy that I thought was the biggest reach in the first round, and that was Bo Nix with Denver. That's a guy that I thought probably was, at least, I pay too much attention to mock drafts, but I thought was probably a second round, late first round guy at the earliest. Denver goes up and gets him all the way at 12, I believe. Where do you think Bo Nix is in terms of both how he looked in week 1 and also, what does his ceiling look like with Sean Payton as his coach and his physical abilities, whether his strengths or his weaknesses? How do those two kind of marry together to what you think he might end up being?
He's got a higher ceiling as almost anybody, and I wouldn't put his ceiling up there, of course, with Daniels or Williams. But when you've got a coach like Sean Payton who kind of understands the importance of timing, ball placement, accuracy, those kinds of things, with somebody like Bo Nix who has a lot of experience in a bunch of different offenses, has the ability to maintain the kind of ball placement that allows you to get stuff like yards after the catch, not just put the ball in the receiver's hands. There's a lot of potential for points there. I will say that, of the quarterbacks that had extensive play, I would say Bo Nix was the least impressive to me. And I think that in a normal year that his performance would be fine. It's just that everybody had such great debuts as rookie quarterbacks that, Nix's, I think, stands a little bit below everybody else. And I think that we kind of saw some of the limitations. I mean, he did have an accurate deep ball that ended up getting kind of dropped. I mean, it's a tough catch, the Robinson drop, but every one of his completions was short. And I think that kind of matches the concerns that we had coming out of Oregon, is that he's a yak merchant. He has the ability to get the ball out really quickly, which is what he did here. He didn't have any sacks. He didn't have any interceptions. He almost threw one kind of early on again. A bunch of quarterbacks had a bunch of mistakes early on and then bounced back from it. But I think that in terms of ball placement, accuracy, timing, he's in the general area where you need a quarterback like him to be. There's still room for improvement there. But given that offense and given the talent of those receivers, I think that there's a lot of potential to score a lot of points. And, even though I was a little unimpressed with the way that Nick's, threaded everything together, I mean, he had 4 scoring drives, right? There's only so much disappointment that you can have in that. So I think that, there's a lot to like about him. I agree with you that he was probably a second rounder in my eyes, but he showed kind of much more of his positives than his negatives in this game. I just want to see a little bit more. I want to see him be successful when he pushes the ball down the field.
I like a lot. I go to year 2 quarterbacks here because I won't go as far as to call them a dark horse, but I do think the division is interesting. I love Boyd. I love Hopkins. I think Calvin Ridley was a heck of an offseason get for the Titans. They have a lot of parts, but safe to say for the year 2 guys, probably the biggest year belongs to Will Levis. He has the keys, it seems, and he has weapons. Spears is nice.
Yeah, and the weapons he has, this year are a little bit of an upgrade over what he had last year. I know we've got some good names last year, but I think that just in terms of the talent that you can bring around this year, he's got some stuff working for him. And I think that, Levis was somebody that I was surprised that he had dropped into the second round. He's somebody that I thought had a lot of potential. He has a lot of experience in specifically pro-style offenses and the types of offenses that Tennessee's been running over the past couple of years. So I figured that, he'd get off the ground a little bit faster than he did last year. But I think this year, we're kind of poised to see all of the things that made him such an intriguing prospect in the first place. I would say that, he only had 5 pass attempts. 4 of them were completed, which is nice. But I'd like to see kind of a lot more volume to kind of see how he meshes with all of, the Titans are bringing in a couple of new people, how he meshes with that group of people, how he meshes with this offense, and make sure that he makes good on not just his strong arm, but his athleticism, because he has a lot of growth here that will allow him to compete in a division that I think is in a lot of flux. I do like the Colts a lot. I do think the Jaguars are in a better spot than a lot of people do, because I like Trevor Lawrence a lot more than a lot of people. So there is a lot of difficulty in this division, but nothing is set in stone, right? And I think that gives him an opportunity to kind of take the lead on controlling and commanding the division, because the Titans have a lot of talent. They just haven't been able to put it together over the past couple of years, and I think that he could be a big part of making sure that they do that.
Okay, Riff, I want to stay on these second-year quarterbacks for a second, because I think it's a really interesting group. You've got C.J. Stroud. Is he able to replicate what we saw in year 1? Is Bryce Young able to figure something out in that situation in Carolina that I think not a lot of people are excited about? We just talked about Will Levis. And then the one that I think is most interesting to me, because I was a little hesitant about his draft position.
And then he gets the best coach.
In the first place, Anthony Richardson, who we didn't get to see much of. Out of those 4 guys, which storyline or which progression are you most interested to see how it plays out this year?
Honestly, Anthony Richardson. I think there's a good storyline with Bryce Young. Maybe, adding another receiver, making that offensive line a little bit better is going to help things out.
They're so bad, though.
That's kind of a problem.
That roster stinks.
No, it's bad. I'm kind of reaching, right? Because I'm like, they added a receiver, I guess, right?
It's a shame, though. Like, it's not just because I signed with. It's just like, what are they doing? Like, he doesn't have a chance.
I agree. and that's kind of why I'm sticking with Anthony Richardson, because I kind of don't want to see this. I mean, it's hard to call him anything but a little kid, but it's kind of hard to see this guy get beat up. Right?
It
not
is
looking good.
It is.
But I think Anthony Richardson, obviously, he only had the 4 games, but and they relied a lot more on the running game when he was healthy and active for those first couple of games. But he's a rookie quarterback that had only had like 12 starts, going all the way back to like his senior year of high school. Honestly, like he just does not have a ton of experience. But when you take a look at the kind of things that you expect from an experienced quarterback, things like pre-snap, post-snap diagnosis, throwing with leverage, as in throwing away from defenders, identifying kind of the pain points of the defense and exploiting them. Those are the kinds of things that he did kind of uncommonly well, near the end of his Florida tenure and, in those couple of games with Indianapolis. It's not enough of a sample size to say that he's got it or anything like that, but I really like what I saw out of him. And I was surprised because, to me, he was just like this tremendously raw prospect and, a quarterback killing it at the combine. I mean, there's only so much that's going to get you, right? So I was a little bit, kind of surprised, but then I see a lot of these quarterback minds that I respect a lot, talk them up. And I kind of wanted to see what they were talking about. You take a look at those couple of Colts games and it looked good. It really did look good. You look at the camp reports that are coming out of Indianapolis, it's like, he's 13 for 15 today, didn't throw a pick, he's got these deep passes to, Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman, and, they've got a pretty decent, group of pass catchers there. I'm really excited to see kind of what Anthony Richardson can do. I still think CJ Stroud, has the crown. Why wouldn't he? But I am excited to see what Richardson can put together.
Now, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. One of these guys is my number one candidate for comeback player of the year. He should have got it last year. But would you rather be Kyler Murray with Gannon, Richardson with Steichen, or dare I say O'Connell with J.J. McCarthy? Like, who would you want to be with if you're a young quarterback of those 3? Put them in order for me.
Gosh, that's so interesting. So Gannon's a much better coach than I gave him credit for, so I'll have to keep that in mind. But I think Steichen is a really tremendous.
He's the one that's probably the most highly thought of, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you pull a bunch of people around the league, Steichen's going to be near the top of that list for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think total situation, you probably want to be in Minnesota because you get to throw to Justin Jefferson. You've got 2 high-level offensive tackles helping protect you. Jordan Addison is going to help you out a lot. I think that situation overall, you take Minnesota, but I think just as a coach, I think probably you would take Steichen 1, O'Connell 2, and then Gannon 3, and this time it's not an insult to Gannon. I think that he did a really great job of keeping that team on an even keel, motivating them, make sure that they were on task, and getting out of the hump that they were in after having not had Kyler Murray for 8-9 games out of the year. So Gannon did a pretty good job of making sure that their offenses and defenses were kind of, detailed and on task, which is a problem that they had under Kingsbury. And he's a great, kind of coach or situation to be with. But I think that of the coaches that he gave me, I have to go with Steichen. I mean, that guy really knows what he's doing. I
think Kyler Murray's going to have a huge year. And maybe it's because nobody expects much from Arizona anyway, but I think he's better than all his detractors. The whole PlayStation thing and then getting hurt and then I don't know, man. I have this weird feeling Kyler Murray has a crazy bounce back year.
I think that there's a lot there. I mean, first of all, like, man, they were doing him dirty with that PlayStation.
Like, there's very few things that are worse than when peers allude to the fact that you don't take your job very serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly, he should have fired his agent to allow that homework clause.
Well, hey, after the guaranteed money, you can say anything bad about me you want to. I may be lazy and bad at homework, but man, I'm rich.
But I got paid.
There's a lot of guaranteed money.
Arif.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just I think that he's ending up in a pretty good situation because Paris Johnson's going to be a lot better than he was last year. You added Marvin Harrison. I think Michael Wilson's a really great receiver. So, you're in a spot where you've got the ability. And, honestly, you take a look at when Kyler Murray's been at his best. He's been able to thread together some really great games. 7 games at a time. That's not small. So I do think that, he's got, some opportunity and some potential in an offense that doesn't get figured out halfway through the season every year. So some opportunity and potential to be a really high-level player.
That's Arif Hasan. Arif, we appreciate the time. We will definitely have to catch up again throughout the season. That was great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, and we're brought to you by our friends at the Team Jack Foundation. TeamJackFoundation.org is where you go to get involved. Volunteer, donate, check out the events, check out the projects they're funding. It's all for the same cause. That's to find better treatments and one day a cure for childhood brain cancer. Can't think of a better cause than that. Make sure you get out to TeamJackFoundation.org. Really good stuff there from Arif.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to him more throughout the football season. That was really appreciate his.
I feel bad for Bryce Young.
I do too. That's a terrible situation.
It's
one of the worst situations you could possibly be in because not only is it a bad roster, it's a bad organization.
Yeah, that's
that's the double whammy. That was my concern about CJ Stroud. But we saw how, at least in Houston, they're allowing DeMeco Ryans to do his job.
So that was the greatest surprise ever, right?
Yes, because we looked at Houston as the dysfunctional organization.
And I remember, and it might have been, who was it? It was Foreman, somebody. It was somebody that I know that's pretty familiar with the Texans organization that thought that the McNairs would get out of the way and let DeMeco do his thing because he said, hey, a lot of the familiarity, this is home, this, that, and the other. And we're like, oh, but there could have been so many other jobs and this, that,
Yeah, listen, I love DeMeco from his time in San Francisco. I actively was rooting for him to take a different job.
Yeah, I mean, Carolina's number one receiver, and I get it. His upside is crazy. I just can't trust him as far as I could throw him because he was a Steeler guy. But I mean, it's Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
So it's Deontay Johnson, Thielen. You got
who's washed, by the way.
You got Hubbard at running back, who I like.
Yeah, he's fine.
But
that roster's a disaster. Overall,
Jonathan Mingo, it's like offensive. They overpaid to try to revamp their line, but it's just. I'd love to see Bryce Young bounce back. I just don't know how with that roster.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And I do feel bad because I do think there are situations in which he could be successful.
Yeah.
The only thing
I'd take him in Pittsburgh.
100%. The only thing I worried about with him, it wasn't talent. It was, he might get beat up because he's so slight, right? But if he was healthy, my thought was, he's definitely.
Well, that's how I felt about Daniels.
Yes.
Because Sam Howell.
Yeah.
Wow, I had a brain freeze because I heard Sauce's truck start up. Was sacked 60
sometimes,
8 times or 9 times last year.
Yeah.
So I don't that's part of it.
Yeah.
I always look at, again, I just go back to my guy Shane, Iowa State's finest. Played with Miami, played in Minnesota. It's like my guy. Now I'm forgetting his name.
What position?
Sage Rosenfels.
Oh, yeah.
Kept telling me to kept telling me to pay attention to
good help, Shane.
Coordinator quarterback relationships.
Yes.
He said it's the most important relationship in sports.
Yeah.
It's not your head coach. He's like, quarterback coordinator relationship. So I'm always, and this was 15 years ago or however long it was. So I'm always paying attention to that. And I'm just in my head, I'm like, I like the fit in Washington. I do. And I'll make the case, and I'll list 888-638-4876. We're wide open here. I think of the coaching moves, the team that will be hurt the most by a coach leaving their staff will be the Dallas Cowboys. because Quinn in Washington taking him away from that defense, and you get a guy in Dallas now who the players don't seemingly openly root for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That may affect that team the most.
That's interesting. I do think so. There are,
because we see it every year, right? Like,
yes.
So why does your boy get killed in Philly? Well, he lost some good he lost both coordinators in 1 year.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden
He
we
went
act
from
like
being a genius to this like kind of psycho.
And I'm not here for, listen, people make fun of Sirianni because he's weird.
Yeah.
He handled the situation as best he could with his quarterback. He ate it.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, look, man, that was on me.
Also, like, a lot of head coaches are weird. Like, let's be real. If you're
that people have not, like, we just crack jokes because we don't know any better. But you're right. You're 100% right.
Like, you have to be pretty weird to be this devoted to something.
I couldn't believe this was the same Dom Capers. I'm like,
yeah.
People get on Dave for dying this year. Like, why is Dom doing? Like, coaches are weird.
Yes, coaches are strange, and they're creatures of habit, and they're very, like, coaches are weirdos.
So I try to not get into that.
Yeah.
You know,
but look at Mike McDaniel. Like, he's not a normal guy.
No,
that's weird. But he's kind of like funny, eccentric. So we like it.
He's the cool weird. He's not like the weird.
Yeah, he's like affable weird, and so we like it.
Yeah.
He's not like you're kind of a weird, creepy,
Hey,
and
listen,
so
go listen to Doug Peterson sometime. A guy who's been around the block.
Yeah,
with
strange.
Several good head coaches, and before he became one.
Yeah, strange guy.
He's pretty out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of like most coaches are weird in one way or another. Like, you don't get into this profession without being a strange guy.
I did like, and I hate saying this, I did like Sean Payton's presser yesterday because I'm not a Payton guy.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. In like, he gets way more credit than he probably deserves.
I'm with you.
It's been a really long time since that Super Bowl.
He's a breeze away from being really, 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 really average.
And he's already kind of average. Like, the overall resume.
We've given it. I mean, he's McCarthy.
Yeah, he's McCarthy, except for he's arrogant about it.
And people don't think McCarthy's a great coach.
Yeah, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
And it seems like McCarthy's easier to get along
but Payton
with.
hasn't won 12 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
At some point, we'll leave Mike McCarthy alone.
At some point, that's going to matter.
See, the problem. So McCarthy suffers from. He's kind of like Shanahan, except Shanahan has had multiple cracks at it.
Yeah.
So we're a little harder on him. But Shanahan has laid more eggs in crucial moments in game than almost any highly thought of head coach.
And you go back to Atlanta OC, you go back to both Super Bowls.
McCarthy's made like
10-point leads,
2 in-game mistakes on the biggest stage, and he's never been able to.
Can I be honest with you? What I think part of it is,
it's just because it's Dallas.
Well, no, not just that, because this goes back to Green Bay. Yeah. Like, we used to hammer him in Green Bay. So like, oh, how do you have Aaron Rodgers and only get 1 Super Bowl? Now I'm kind of like, oh, it's a miracle he got a Super Bowl out of Aaron Rodgers, because that guy's a weirdo. Like, he seems like a tough hang.
Aaron Rodgers?
Aaron Rodgers seems like a real tough hang.
I was watching him. Full disclosure, I watch a ton of NFL exhibition, right?
Yeah.
I'm watching Tyrod Taylor and Aaron Rodgers on the sidelines, and I'm like, I wonder if Aaron likes him. Because Tyrod was like joking with him and talking to him, and Aaron wasn't really giving him much. I don't know if but I didn't want to judge because sometimes, like,
you don't really know what's going on.
Or maybe Tyrod wasn't funny, or A-Rod was maybe in the game.
Yeah.
But he doesn't strike me as like
super dialed in during an exhibition.
But he was wearing headsets the whole time, so maybe he was just trying to get familiar.
I always thought that
I feel bad for Robert Saleh,
I always thought that team got hot at the exact right time because there's that time period, where there's like 4/5 of the way in or 3/4 of the way in. You lose like 3 or 4 games and you just get on that hot streak, even if you have to go through the wild card.
Listen to
and
what
I
I'm
think they did that.
You want the best value for Super Bowl odds in the NFC?
What's that?
Take Green Bay.
So
they are so much better than anybody thinks they are.
I'm
telling you, Green Bay is going to be a problem.
I want to return to McCarthy for a second, though, because I have
JJ or Mike?
Mike. Because I have a theory about why we're harder on him than we are on like Sean Payton or Kyle Shanahan or some of these guys, right?
What?
I think it's because of how he looks.
If he was a thin guy?
He looks dumpy.
Yeah. So that's a thing.
That's a real thing.
You're 100%.
Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Cliff Kingsbury. Kept getting jobs.
I just had this conversation with a guy on the national level.
Like, that's a real thing.
And we referenced Mangino and guys.
Yeah.
And So you know who's becoming a victim of that because his teams aren't performing at a very high level, even though we think he's a pretty good coach.
Matt Campbell?
No, he's fit.
Yeah, but he's a little goofy looking, but sure. Yeah.
Brett Bielema.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
People close to, ask your guy. People in Champaign and around those coaching circles think Bielema's mailed it in because of how he's letting him
physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. How it's gotten away from him a little bit.
And it's a perception thing.
Yes, 100%.
No, I don't, I mean, who am I to say whether he works less hard than he did 15 years ago?
Yeah. And you can make the argument that a lot of coaches physically get worse because they are working harder.
I do agree with you.
That's a real thing. Like Mike McCarthy's always been kind of dumpy looking. He's always kind of looked like
Andy Reid got in shape.
Yeah. Well, and he got a hard time for a long time too until he was able to get over the hump.
Yep.
Like that's a real thing. And it's a stupid reason, but like our eyes and how we perceive things, it's really hard to get past.
There's no question. Why do we kind of gravitate towards Mike Tomlin? He does have great pressers.
Omar Epps, baby.
But he looks cool.
He looks like a professional actor. Like really, he looks like he could be in movies.
Knock it off.
Sean McVay. Like
he's great, by the way.
Yeah, he was fun on the call over the weekend.
He should do play-by-play.
Hey, we'll see. Coming up next, we'll wrap up the show. SDB, I'm Ravi, Lulla, Hurrdat Sports Radio. Wrapping up the show here on a Monday on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla on the Pillar Exterior stage. And we're brought to you by our friends at unionomaha.com. Make sure you get over to unionomaha.com to get tickets for their friendly match against Bellevue University coming up on August 21st. It's going to be cool since it's not a League One match. They've got a little bit more leeway to have some fan interaction and some fun stuff for you out at Warner Park. Make sure you get over to unionomaha.com to get tickets for that match. Maybe pick up some merch while you're at it that you can wear August 21st to that friendly against.
Now we feel like Kevin Stefanski's a pretty good coach, right?
So it's this, you know how if you're a certain level of rich, you go from a weirdo to being eccentric. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's how it is with head coaches. After a certain number of wins, you stop being a weirdo, and they're like, look how
like Stefanski's pressers used to be comedy.
Yeah, and now we like their roster, and they're pretty good, and he's winning with backup quarterbacks and stuff. You're like, not bad.
I remember LaFleur used to be young and smug.
Yeah,
all right, he's kind of over his head.
And now it's like,
we were picking Aaron Rodgers' side during the whole LaFleur-Rodgers feud.
Yeah.
LaFleur looks pretty okay, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers looks worse every day.
Gutekunst is now one of the greatest GMs in football.
Yeah.
We thought that thing was handled so crazy.
Especially when they're like, okay, you've got Aaron Rodgers and you're wasting a first-round pick on some guy from Utah State?
You're not drafting. Get Rodgers some – like we act like we didn't say this. And it still could be true. It still could be true. And LaFleur could still be a good coach.
Yeah. Like
apparently Gutekunst is still a good manager or general manager.
And guess what? They're all still weirdos. All of them.
All right.
Coaches are weird, man.
Quarterbacks.
You have to be weird to devote yourself, like to have. I have this firm belief. It's not just coaches, right? I feel the same way about like great quarterbacks, about really great athletes. They are not well-rounded human beings.
Yeah.
You can't be.
It's hard.
Like Peyton Manning is a strange dude. We kind of like him because he's funny, but he's a weird guy. Like, he's a strange dude. Like, you have to be wired a little different to spend that amount of time watching film the way he did or, like, doing whatever, like, being so devoted to something. Like, something's got to be a little off.
Yeah.
Like,
so having said that, you know who you're going to like?
Who?
Braylon Warren.
Dude, I already like Braylon Warren.
He's weird.
If I'm being honest with you.
But I'm
already a fan.
He's great.
I'm already a fan.
But he's very, very different. But anyway, keep going. Quarterbacks, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So I did want to get to quarterbacks. We were talking a lot with Arif Hasan of Wide Left Football about quarterbacks, whether it was rookie quarterback, second-year guys, whatever. And there was a comparison that I wanted to make that tell me if I'm crazy or being lazy here. Because I'm open to either.
Crazy or lazy, I like it.
But
it's gonna be that's a show topic, Shane.
Yeah, we can make a whole segment out of that.
I like that.
Sponsored by I don't know who. Zipline.
Our friends at Warhorse, I think, are coming back.
Warhorse,
Warhorse. We'll get a segment out there for Warhorse.
Crazy or lazy?
I have a really hard time with Anthony Richardson because we've seen.
I argued with one of our peers locally over him.
What was your side?
Somebody referred to it as either the worst pick or one of the worst reaches in the history of.
I don't think it's that.
Anyway, and I was like, there's been
way worse.
Way worse.
I mean, I would argue Bo Nix is a worse reach than Anthony Richardson was, right?
Now we'll see. I mean,
listen, he could end up being good and it was still a reach because he was going to be there later. That's what a reach is, right? It doesn't mean he's bad. It means you could have got him later. But anyway.
I don't know. The Chiefs get a lot of credit for moving up to get Mahomes, and I'm not sure how many people were.
It's fair, yeah. I mean,
right?
That's a revisionist history thing, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
Chiefs look pretty smart.
They not bad.
Yeah.
Listen,
because remember,
if Andy Reid's going
to moved up and had Alex Smith coming off a good year.
Yeah, but I'm going to trust whatever Andy Reid tells me about a quarterback.
I'm just saying.
But you're right.
Go both ways.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. It's a revisionist history because people are like, hey, Alex Smith is pretty good. What are we doing here? It's like the thing with Jordan Love. It's like, hey, Aaron Rodgers
it's why I it's why I defended the Falcons pick.
Yeah,
and you call me crazy. I think the Falcons are in a great spot.
I mean, I love Michael Penix, so I just hope he's good.
No, and he balled.
My issue with
Miami.
Atlanta was just I don't want Penix to get buried. That was my biggest issue, right? But is there a chance that Penix is better than Kirk Cousins a year from now? Decent shot, I would say.
God, you hate Cousins.
No, I don't hate Cousins.
You're exactly right.
You're poo-pooing the numbers.
No, he's old and he's coming off an Achilles.
No, I know.
He's
had a really good career.
No, he has, but I doubt my issue with Cousins is my doubting of his ability for that to continue at where he's at with that injury.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Look at his ball handling, Caleb Williams. It's incredible.
But
play fakes.
Yeah, he's got a really good feel. He's just like a really natural feel.
He looks like a guy that's repped his ball handling in front of the mirror.
He looks like a
times.
point guard.
Yeah.
He looks like a point guard navigating a high ball screen. That's what it looks like when he's doing that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Anthony Richardson, I struggled with him as the number 4 overall pick because of the production and the lack of starts. Mm-hmm. The numbers at Florida aren't special.
Especially against light competition.
Yes. There was a lot on tape there that was a little scary.
Okay.
And it felt like his physical attributes did a lot of the heavy lifting in that draft profile, which I get. They are special. Okay? I'm going to give you a comparison here. Anthony Richardson, his last year at Florida, started 12 games, completed 53.8% of his passes, 2,500 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I'm going to give you another guy. A guy who is 6'5", 240 pounds, runs a 4.6 instead of a 4.3, has a 35-inch vertical instead of a 40-inch vertical, and broad jumps 10.1 instead of 10.9. So physically they're similar, but Anthony Richardson's a little bit better of an athlete. Fair?
So,
with those numbers.
Yeah, with those measurables.
Okay, this guy also only started one full season in college. 65%, just under 65% completion, 2,800 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, almost identical, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. A, do you know who that is? And B,
when did the 20 and 5 play?
What years? Well, that's probably going to give it away. It was recent. It was very recent. And they were both from the SEC.
The numbers seem low for Milton. 20?
It is Joe Milton.
Okay. The 20 touchdowns seem low.
Yeah, he never threw a ton of touchdowns, but the ratios were good. The completion percentage was good.
Okay.
And we pick apart.
Does that count as the right answer?
Well, yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
But here's my question. If Joe Milton has that in year 3 at Michigan instead of year 6 at Tennessee, is he a first-round draft pick? Had we just seen too much of Joe Milton?
I think that's lazy.
Okay.
Because
I'm open to it. I'm open to it. I am.
I want to see how it looks.
Okay.
Are we getting vertical in the passing game? Are we throwing RPOs?
Sure.
what's the offense look like?
Mm-hmm.
You know, sail routes, overs, digs, square. It's like, what am I throwing?
Yeah, what routes are you throwing?
And design run versus QB runs.
Sure.
I'm kind of with you, though, on the athletic comp thing.
They're very similar physically.
Yeah.
They're very similar physically.
But I would have to see how it works. So the thing that I understood about Richardson that I don't think he got near enough credit for was the way he interviewed.
Well, and we've heard a lot of stories about that, like at the symposium where he's cleaning up trash. Like character-wise,
he's
seems
apparently like top-notch.
Yes, which totally fair. That's an X factor that I am not accounting for in this scenario. And I don't know anything about Milton in that sense. I don't.
I don't either. I'm not.
So I don't want to condemn Milton.
No. People got to be smart enough.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, just because you say something positive about one person doesn't mean, like, because I know
nothing about
full
Milton.
disclosure, I hate that.
Yeah, no, I know.
Because then all people do is end up explaining themselves.
But I have no idea. I don't know anything about Milton as a person.
I'm like...
Okay, so
people are like, oh, what do you say to these people that are offended by X, Y, and Z? And I was like, I don't know. Like, get tougher. No, I'm dead serious. Like, I can't stand. Like,
no, I know. I get it.
We can't go around apologizing to every flipping body because their feelings are hurt over something that doesn't get enough attention.
So here's my question, though. So maybe it's a lazy take, and I'm willing to entertain that. But if we hadn't seen so much of Joe Milton prior to him having his full year as a starter, would there have been less than a 5-round difference in their draft stocks, in their draft positions? Because that's the part that I'm struggling with.
Yeah, I mean, was he throwing to Hyatt and those guys, or I don't know.
Not in 2023, he wasn't. Hyatt was gone by then.
Yeah.
He wasn't thrown to the Hendon Hooker group. Like, that's where I'm struggling between these two guys. Because listen, I'm not saying Anthony Richardson might be really good, and we've seen a lot of Joe Milton that says it's probably not going to look like it does in preseason, right? But I'm sitting here and I go, that's a 5-round difference?
Yeah, the place you may get in trouble with the hard comp like that is one guy does have Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
So ask me in a year.
That's fair. One guy's got Shane Steichen and the other one's in New England, which is the dumpster fire.
Yeah.
That's a fair point there. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We will be back tomorrow with more Hurrdat Sports Radio.